Welcome back, webheads, to the next episode of Spidey Swing-Bys. I'm your host, Christian Ashley of Systematic Geekology. As we continue on through every chronological appearance of Spider-Man by release order, today we are in Amazing Spider-Man 19. Getting back into the thick things, this is a very great issue, one that improves on the last one a lot. So let's get into the info before we head on in. This is Amazing Spider-Man 19, released in week 37, 1964. The release date was September 8th, 1964. The story is entitled Spidey Strikes Back, as you can see there on the cover. It is written by Stan Lee, but actually, hold on one second. Let me actually get here. This is written by Spidey's godfather, Stan Lee, illustrated by Spidey's big daddy, Steve Ditko, and lettered by Sam Rosen, Spidey's second cousin on his uncle's side. Never changed, Stan. This is inked by Steve Ditko and edited by Stan Lee. So, with that in mind, what else was going on in Marvel this month? Well, plenty. As is usual, Marvel, there's been very few bad months. Some bad stories, maybe okay stories, but very few bad months. First off, we have Journey into Mystery 110, where the mighty Thor has to go up against Cobra and Mr. Hyde as the machinations of Loki continue, and the life of Jane Foster is on the line. We get his first use of the time warping abilities of Mjolnir. Was that foreshadowed beforehand? I don't think so, but you know what? It is what it is. It's an established power now of what Mjolnir is capable of. After that, we have Tales to Astonish 62. Where? Oh boy. Giant Man's identity as Hank Pym is discovered by Second Story Sammy. Who? A crook who appears exactly once in this one steals Giant Man's costume to become Giant Man and get in on some crimes. The Wasp gets captured for a bit. Eventually, Hank Pym is able to get back the suit and mess with him till he forgets his secret identity and forgets that he wanted to be a criminal. So, Second Story Sammy, that great villain that you're always wondering, well, why did he never show up in the Ant-Man films? He's got his place in Marvel history. It's because it's the only time he appears. That's how lame the story is. Then, on the Hulk side of things for Tales to Astonish, we learn finally that the Chameleon was behind the attacks against him as the Hulk goes up against him, and Betty Ross is misnamed as Betty Brant a couple of times because poor Stan just can't keep track of it. Even with the alliteration, it gets in his way. So that's it for that one. Next up, we have good old X-Men number 8, where the X-Men face off against Unus, the Untouchable, who, as a villain, not the worst, not the best. And in fact, he has a story to tell in Spectacular Spider-Man. So when we get there about, I don't know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we can tell that story. So remember that moment in time when we've come all that way, which I highly doubt, but we'll get there. We'll see. We'll see. And then we have Avengers 10, where we have the first appearance of Immortus as he pits the Avengers against different figures in history and mythology. A very fun issue. A pseudo first appearance of Hercules because he hasn't appeared in Thor yet, and it's kind of like the early prototype of what will come. There's that. Then we have Fantastic Four 33, where they team up with Namor to fight Atuma in his first appearance as he tries to take control of Atlantis. Then after that, we have Sergeant Fury number 12, where Nick Fury is tasked with finding out if one of the Howling Commandos is a no-good sympathizer and traitor. As we deal with concerns that happen, those of German ancestry, Italian ancestry. We don't get to the Japanese side of things, I'm fairly certain. I'd have to look that up again. But effective story nonetheless. After that, we have Strange Tales 127, where after messing with Reed Richards, the Human Torch and the Thing are challenged by a mysterious villain who turns out to be Mr. Fantastic in disguise to show them, hey, there's a reason I'm the leader, you idiots. And an act of jerkery so amazing, even for early read, that really just kinda goes, "Man, you just had an agenda, didn't you, didn't you, buddy?" And in fact, surprisingly enough, that story plays into the events of the issue of Spider-Man we'll be reading. We'll get there when we get there. But, I know surprising absolutely no one, the Doctor Strange side of things in Strange Tales, miles better as he continues to fight against Dormammu. Excellent story. And then finally, for the Marvel side of things, we have Tales of Suspense number 60, where Iron Man is sought for the disappearance of Tony Stark after he's unable to exit his armor. People think he's done something to Tony. Meanwhile, Hawkeye and the Black Widow join the fray as Captain America, on his own story, fights off against the assassin. And that is it for our Marvel side of things. We need to get back to the Amazing Spider-Man issue 19. A very, very fun issue. As we start off with Spider-Man back in action. He puts a spider signal down. There's some crooks who are trying to steal from the Midtown Bank, and they're scared of him. I thought he gave up. He's like, nope. They thought he was a coward. Nope, not anymore, baby. The Marvel Universe has to learn that being a coward isn't that bad. As he whacks the thugs, takes them up, and then leaves the scene of his superhero-y work, superheroing. I don't know what's the verb there. Uh, we go to a lecture hall where a guest star speaker, uh, Jonah Jameson, publisher of the Daily Bugle, is going to talk about how Spider-Man is a cowardly fraud. But as he is smiling, grinning ear to ear, he is told by someone nearby, something you should probably know. And it's like, no, nah, someone named Wormley, by the way. Don't spoil my moment of triumph. But, sir, it's something you should know. Tell me later, after I destroy Spider Man's image. But I can't wait. It's about Spider Man. And the fear starts creeping in. It is? The whole town's talking about it. There was a gang of bank robbers. And then Spider Man appeared and single handedly he. They're stupid. And Jameson runs away because he's not feeling well. He starts beating a wall in anger because Spider-Man's back, baby. But this is not unnoticed by the Human Torch as he flies around, completely exhausted by the fact that Reed Richards pulled that trick on him last we saw him. Oh my gosh. Oh, Reed. Oh, early 60s Reed. That he is completely taken by surprise when a lasso covered in asbestos, as helpfully noted by our narration there, wraps around him, and we see that the enforcers are here. Fancy Dan took him down with that. We've got Ox grabbing him in. Excuse me, Montana, not Fancy Dan, my bad. As they try and rope him up, he manages to get away for a little bit, but that's when Fancy Dan shows up to hit him with a cylinder filled with chemical foam that can stop his heat. But they're not alone. The Sandman is there, and he wraps around the torch. We have the history between them we've seen before in Strange Tales and the like, and manages to suffocate Johnny into unconsciousness. And they are going to use him as part of a ploy to bring Spider-Man to them. Meanwhile, while they've got him in an airtight little glass cylinder, Spider-Man goes back home because what does he have to worry about? Nothing. Everything's going well. He's back in action. He gets back home, sees that Aunt May is sound asleep and doing well, gets back into his regular Peter Parker clothes, and the next day, he does that thing which I find funny because I always kind of did something similar to my grandmother's. When she says, "What's a pretty young girl doing here in Aunt May's kitchen?" It just tickles me because like that's something I'd always do for them, and still do to this day for the one who's still alive. I just thought it was a nice bit of characterization there. Of like him, like they both obviously know she's not young, but it's a playful thing between family to do something like that. And seeing her emboldened, he's emboldened again. Flash Thompson's doing his regular thing. He was always right, and he was. That Spider-Man wasn't a phony. He wasn't a coward. There's people interested in the Spider-Man fan club again, but one person who isn't interested in him is Liz Allen, who, after his outburst against her not too long ago, decided, nope, I'm done with you. And Peter even gives him a sympathetic shoulder for a second, but Flash, being Flash, rejects it. And it's still like, as Peter says, it burns me up that Spider-Man's biggest fan has to be a weak-witted, muscle-bound, lame brain like him. I wonder what he'd do if he ever found out who Spidey really is. And that's one thing when that does come out later on that I really wish was focused on more, because Flash does gain the Venom symbiote forever from now, which knows who Peter Parker is. And at this point in time, like, hey, that's a good story that we could have had that was never really focused on. But that's that. So as he's going around, Peter notices his spider sense going off, and he recognizes Fancy Dan and says, "Oh, well, if he's around here, surely the enforcers are doing something. Looks like a job for Spider-Man." Suits up, goes after him, and ends up in trouble. Because imagine that. He's going up against villains. He wrestles with them, fights them, swings around, gets away from them. They're really no match for him because why would the enforcers ever really be a match for him unless they used a bunch of numbers against him? But as the police are being called in due to the fracas, he decides to slip away into confusion. They get away as well. He goes to the Daily Bugle, where as we saw last time, Betty was with another fella, and this fella has a name. That name being Ned Leeds. This is his first actual appearance outside of what we saw before. He gets introduced to Peter, and hey, they have a very civil meeting. And it's revealed that Betty is like going out with him on dates, and she's like, I don't know how to explain myself. I've been seeing him, and Peter's like, very gracious, says, nothing to explain. He seems like a nice guy. Why shouldn't you see him? And I think he genuinely means that. Like, I think that there's some obvious hostility that exists. Be like, hey, I was interested in her and all this, but at the end of the day, Peter does want to see Betty happy. And before they can talk about it more, he sees J. Jonah Jameson, and Betty's a little upset because she privately admits she was kind of hoping that he would, be a little jealous, and she wonders if he's found someone else, which has always been a concern in our head because that's always what she's worried about. Jameson gets back in the Daily Bugle, very upset, tells everyone to get out of his way. Of course, he minds, and everyone's actually kind of happy. It looks like Stoneface is back to normal again. And this kind of that old trope of we want our jerk back, and we want that jerky J. Jonah Jameson who's all up in arms over everything involving Spider-Man. He's angry, 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 cannot handle any criticism against that idea. Such a fun character moment there. And Peter tries to talk to him. Jameson doesn't want anything to do with him. Excuse me. As we go back to the Enforcers and Sandman, they talk about how they're going to use the Human Torch at bait. Johnny tries to escape but fails because there's not enough oxygen in the tank for him to use his powers to flame on. So, going back to Peter, what does he decide to do with Spider-Man? He decides to see J. Jonah Jameson and mess with him just to troll him. So he says, "Hi, Smiley. Did you know I was back?" And Jameson, raising his fist at him, says, "Blast you, you miserable costume freak. I'll get you for this last thing I'll do. I'll drive you out of town. I'll find some way to beat you." And Spider-Man swings away, says, "Sure you will, sweetie, but forgive me if I don't hold my breath while I'm waiting. I'll get you, you hear? I'll get you." And the continuing rivalry between the two of them is just so well played. Jameson was on cloud nine. Now he's ended down in the dumps because Spider-Man's back. He's more popular than ever. And Spider-Man notices a local little stool pigeon nearby who will, tell him information he wants to lean in. He knows it's kind of a bit of a trap. So he's figured out where the enforcers are. And all that mess. So as he tracks them down, he ends up at their base of operations, locates the torch, and in a stunning sense of not being self-aware, Granted, he does not know the Sandman is involved yet. I will give him that. But a spider sense doesn't go off. And yeah, he notices a bunch of sand on top of this glass cylinder keeping Johnny inside. You don't think, hmm, maybe maybe I should look into that? Yeah. It doesn't. So, unsurprisingly, that sand turns out to be the Sandman. He attacks Spider-Man. The Enforcers are brought in. Uh, Human Torch is still trapped in the glass. What you call it? They tussle for a bit, getting through the fight. Spider-Man weaves and dodges out of the way. They manage to get a couple hits on him, but he's still far stronger than them. Sandman rolls up into a little sandball with just his head, knocks Spider-Man off balance as the ox hits him off balance, but Spider-Man is able to still, jump out of the way, jump over them, take them down, beats Ox with a punch to the gut that allows, in the midst of all this, for the Human Torch to get out as Spider-Man is able to hit the glass just right, which allows the Human Torch to flame on, and he joins the fight. The two of them team up and fight against Sandman, and the Enforcers and their goons manage to take them down one by one. They do, in the midst, they still aren't really as aware of each other's powers as they should be. So they get tangled up in the webbing for a bit. So Johnny is able to get them out. They agree to work together even more. And Johnny tries to ask him about what happened to the Green Goblin. Peter is being a bit too dodgy for his own good, says Johnny asks too many questions. And then we get to this panel where two cops have shown up and doing their due diligence try to arrest the Sandman with suicidal overconfidence. And of course, he's able to slip away because hey, he's made out of sand and they're not. So, uh, points for effort, I guess, and that's it. Yeah, but it's weird because they actually succeed in taking him down. It's kind of like he was just too tired from the fight, which is I don't believe for a second. So I guess it's just a convenient way for Sandman to end up in prison, and Johnny and Peter have a little moment to themselves and say, Johnny's probably going to get all the credit for it. As we leave them, we go we go to the Daily Bugle and we see poor down in the dumps Jonah, and he wonders if it's too late for him, if he's too old to join the French Foreign Legion, so he doesn't have to hear about Spider-Man anymore. Oh, poor Jonah. There'd be some way for him to still find him in that scenario. As Peter Parker shows up, says he's got some photographs of this fight between Spider-Man and the Enforcers, which raises his spirits. He's going to pay Peter Parker next to nothing, but he got the money he needs. Jameson's got the story he needs. He can spin it however he wants. And Peter talks with Betty about how she's got a date with Ned tonight. See her tomorrow instead. And he talks with Ned again. The two of them are still fairly friendly with each other. Betty reveals again she's kind of a little hoping he would be a little jealous. But that's it for that. And we get to our final page here, where we're setting up for some mystery. As people are reading the paper. Um, and we go to the Fantastic Four briefly. We don't see them, but we see the Baxter building. And they ask him what happened last time, but Johnny says, there's nothing he can do to get him to talk, and he still can't make up his mind whether he wants to like him or hate him. Perfectly in character for early Johnny and Peter. Love their friendship, love their rivalry. They're such great foils to one another. It's so much fun. But as Peter is leaving school that day, a mysterious man wearing sunglasses and an obvious purple suit starts to track him down and is following him. And at this point, there's a mysterious figure in shadow in a green bathrobe who we're not sure of. I know who it is because I read these stories, but I know both of these characters and who they are. So the next issue is setting up for who these people are. Who is this private detective? Who is trying to find out who Peter Parker, uh, why Peter Parker needs to be under surveillance? Well, wouldn't you like to know the answer to that? Well, you're going to have to wait a week because next time on Spidey Swing-Bys, we're going to be in Avengers 11 where we get a Spider-Man robot and an actual Spider-Man appearance and very little of him interacting with the Avengers. But still a fun story. I'm looking forward to that one. Yeah, could it have been better? Yes. Now, as to issue 19 proper, what did I rate the last one? Did I rate like an 8.5 or a 9? I'm going to put this one down for a 9. Um, the Sandman being caught in such a stupid way, it's like, yeah, it's great to show heroic cops, doing their jobs, but it's the Sandman. It's not like they're tackling Fancy Dan or someone like that. That's absurd. But the team up between him and Johnny, the two of them slowly becoming friends in their own teenager way. You've got the introduction of Ned Leeds. It's going to be a huge factor coming up soon, and then later on as well. The machinations of Betty and Liz fighting for the same guy. Well, there's this mysterious Mary Jane Watson out there too. You got Aunt May coming back to health. Jonah Jameson being brought down low, while at the same time finding a new life, a new zeal for taking down Spider-Man. This is a fun issue. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. So once again, next time we will be in Avengers number 11. So until next time, webheads, see ya.